The story begins in the 14th century, when there was a war between the United States and Japan. Now in the middle of this fight, we see a scene named Louis, who destroyed a Japanese island with his army. He was on a mission. Now a little later, all the American planes reached the top of this island, and it rained down on him. But in the meantime, several Japanese planes attacked them, and many American soldiers in this attack. Then they were killed, and then they were destroyed. Then his friend fell to the ground with great difficulty. Now that a tire of this plane had exploded, their landing was very difficult. Then he and all his companions were saved. Now this story goes into flashback, and now we see Louis's childhood. In fact, Louis was quite the devil in his childhood. He drinks alcohol and smokes. Now one day, Louis was drinking and watching his older brother race. But then the guard saw him and ran after him to catch him. But here, Louis ran so loudly that the guard kept looking at him. When Louis's brother Pete, he saw her running away. I realized that if Louis got the right training, he would be a good one. He can be an athlete. The next day, he began to train him. In the next few years, Louis's speed has increased. He grew up with all the athletes in his city, left behind, and then they see. Louis became very popular in his city. Now during a tournament, he covered 2 kilometers in 4 minutes. He broke the record of all his schools. Looking at Louis's ability now, the United States has the opportunity to participate in the Olympics. Before going to the Olympics, Louis embraced his older brother and thanked him. Because of his support, Louis was impossible to reach. Then they saw the day of the race. Louis was listening to the news on the radio. Louis was in a race of 5,000 meters. When the race begins, several tails. The players left him behind, although Louis did not lose. And he began to run with all his might. Despite all the effort, he finished the race in 8th place, even though he lost the race. Everyone there was clapping for Louis. Because Louis' last lap runs in 6 seconds and a new one. The world record was set. When Louis's family heard the news, then the eyes of those who rejoiced came down with tears. Then he went 44. Running for the Olympics and gold. I will try to get a medal. And then Louis's death was over. Because the world before the Olympics, the war began. Now here comes the story in the present time, when Louis became a U.S. Army soldier. But even then, Louis continued to train so that he could. After finishing, he won a medal for his country at the Olympics. One day when Louis was training, then they told him that they had to go to another place. Actually, a U.S. Army plane crashed in the Pacific, and Louis and his companions had a mission to survive the crash. Bring people back. Then, during that mission, they found the same broken plane, which was a lot of damage during the previous mission. Then a little later, the engine shut down. And then they see. The other engine also stopped working. Before they can do it, they are in the Pacific. He crashed in Kashmir. 8 people were killed. Although Louis, Phil, and Max survived the crash, it was bad enough here, because there was a lot of pain in his head. Now Louis has a hard time taking out a live board, and then the 3 came to the top of the board. Phil said to Louis, "I probably won't survive now." But here Louis gave him the courage to say that the army will come to our rescue. We have to save ourselves. Now on top of this board, Louis got some cans of chocolate and a bottle of water. And then they made their way in the morning. They will eat a cup of chocolate and drink 2 cups of water. Tonight they were on the board. And when the morning, their eyes opened and they saw the sky. Now here Louis runs a flurrigan. And then he saw them go away. And then Louis looked at those chocolate packets, which were now empty, because he ate all the chocolate last night. And when he saw it, he was angry. But he decided to stay. For if they live in the sea, we have to work together. Louis is now immersed in these thoughts. Then a seagull came over their board. Now you see it. Louis pulled the trigger. And then the 3 of them ate it together. And then the taste of the seagull was so useless. Then they ate them. So they decided to make a fortune and created a fish they will try to catch. After a while, they caught a fish. Eat your appetite. Then they ate their food. Then they waited patiently for a new opportunity. There was a storm in the sea that night, and their little ones. Then they were eaten by the great waves. Then he asked God if he was alive. He survived his whole life. He will serve the people. Then the Lord listened to him and the 3 of them. Peace be upon him from the storm. It rained the next morning, and they drank plenty of water today. Days passed by, and they watched. They were in the sea for 27 days, and then he saw it again for 8 days, and signaled the flares. Now this plane. I saw them. It wasn't an American plane, it was a Japanese plane. And they see them. Then he shot them. The 3 of them jumped into the water and saved their lives, and then the gunfire hit them hard. Although Lucy lived there, he repaired the boat and saved the lives of his companions. Then the day went by, and hungry, Due to thirst, Mac lost his life. Looking at them and seeing them, they're heavy. Then he put his body in the water. Then they both died. I gave up hope in this little nugget. I sat and waited for my death. After a few days, the two of them were together. A little shade in the sun. It was not a Japanese ship, but a Japanese ship. Now here the soldiers arrested both of them, and they were taken to a Japanese prison, which was in the middle of a forest. Now the prison warden recognized Louis, because in a newspaper Louis Olympics, I saw the picture. There was a war between Japan and the United States, so the warden gave Louis and Phil a dark room. I closed, and then the rest of the Japanese senators tortured them both. This series continued for the next several days, and after a few months of torture, the Japanese government put them both in a Tokyo jail. The prison was a detention camp, where many American soldiers were held, and the prison warden, whose name was Whitnaby, he tortured the American prisoners. When the prisoners came to the prison, then he looked into the eyes of the blind, and when he saw it, he became angry. And for that little mistake, he hit Louis well. Then, when Louis came to his cell, then he met the rest of the Americans, and then he became friends with the rest of them. The next morning, everything was done. He gathered the prisoners and separated them from the prisoners. There was no talent in them. Now that Whitnaby found out that Louis is an Olympic athlete, so he took a stand between a Japanese officer and Louis, and hunger and thirst. Louis, he was so weak that he fled to the ground. Now that Louis didn't finish the race, and then again, and he made himself known. The others and the Americans, look at Senko, who stole the newspaper from prison and read the news of World War II. Unfortunately, he found out. And the prisoner. The newspaper was stolen by Whitnaby and hit him like a dog. Louis had no other food, so he stood up and killed his companion. I watched him eat. One day, a Japanese news channel visited Louis because they wanted to show the whole world Louis's interview. It actually exists in America. Louis's family thought it might. The Japanese army has killed Louis, and there was a lot of pressure on Japan. The next day, Louis was taken to a radio station, and the Japanese government pressured him to lie. The U.S. government of Japan treat prisoners well. After this interview, Louis was taken to a restaurant, and after several months, Louis ate a full meal. 2 Japanese officers met him, and he promised that if he did, he would fight the United States. It will give you a good life in Japan. Louis made this offer, rejected because he couldn't betray himself at any price. Not from Louis. Then they put him in prison again. And then he went to prison. Now here he is. He said to me, "You are just like me. If you are not an American, maybe we are good friends." Louis refused to speak out against the United States. Then he ordered everyone to come to Louis's mouth. Killed. And if they do not, they are friends of Louis. We'll kill the fella. All this to save your friend's life. The prisoners killed Louis one by one, and when he saw it, he was wounded. Now, a few days later, a comedy show was held in the prison so that all of them, including the prisoners,
officer,
may also be incarcerated. And now the middle of it, he told Louis that the government transferred him to another. He went to jail in the morning. He will leave here, but he wasn't happy to hear it, and he wasn't happy. And then the life of the prisoners became much better. And finally, they breathed into China. Although the happiness ended in a few days, because some Russian planes bombed this camp. And many American prisoners and some Japanese soldiers in the attack. He died. After the attack, their camp was completely destroyed. Then the prisoners took one another. Transferred to prison. No one else was in charge of this prison except himself. Now look at the witness. And the earth fell under Louis's feet, and he fell to the ground. Once again, all the prisoners of this prison. Then he said, "Once again, I'm sorry." The next day, all the prisoners went to work, where they had to load large bags of coal into a ship. Many in the next few days. The prisoners lost their lives because they were heavy and hungry. The thirsty ones were all weak. When working one day, Louis was quite tired and sat in a corner and began to relax, when a Japanese man saw him resting. Then he took her and brought her to Whitnaby. Then he ordered Louis, so that he lifted the piece of wood over his head. If he falls down the tree immediately, they will be shot. Then they went hungry. Louis, he didn't know enough to pick up the piece of wood. On your soul, to save, and he lifted it like a tree on his head. Looking at Louis's obsession now, all the prisoners were surprised, and then the names of Louis began to be called. And then he saw it grow and grow, and in his eyes, then he raised the wood and the wood. Then he saw the anger, and then he turned to Louis. Now a few days later, the Japanese have all of them gather the prisoners, and he told them, "The battle is over, and now you all be free." And then all of them. He ordered the prisoners to bathe in a river, and here Louis and his companions thought it was Japanese, and they will kill. And then they saw a plane in the sky, and as it approached, all the prisoners rejoiced. This time it was not Japan but the United States, and then they dropped the boxes full of food. And then, several months later, all the prisoners, he ate his food. The other end, we see Louis who came to meet Vitnabi in his room, because he wanted to know what he was up to. But none of them benefited, because he was running away from here. Now looking at the childhood photos of Vitnabik, Louis thought, how can such an innocent child have such a stony heart? A few weeks later, Louis and the rest of his team returned to your homeland, and the United States is coming. Louis first kissed the soil of his Irish. Then Louis met his family. Then he took them by the throat and cried with a loud voice. Now, a few years later, Louis married a good girl and then had 2 children. There were others, and then he hid for years. Because in the war, they were tortured. The Japanese government put him in jail. With him, Louis at that age, participated in the Olympics and spoiled his childhood. Then, and with it, the movie ends.